Hello, my friend. There comes a time in your life when you have to stop explaining yourself. A time when you no longer beg to be understood. A time when you finally realize that peace is not something you stumble upon, peace is something you protect, something you choose. Every day. Even when it's hard. Even when it means letting go of people you once held close. Because the truth is, not everyone who walks with you is meant to stay. Not every voice deserves a place in your mind, and not every connection is aligned with your growth. We live in a world that constantly tells us to do more, give more, be more for everyone else. To stay connected, stay available, stay accommodating. But at what cost? When you're constantly pouring into others and leaving nothing for yourself, that's not kindness, it's self-neglect. When you silence your needs to keep the peace, you're not keeping peace. You're keeping dysfunction comfortable. And the moment you begin to truly value your energy, your time, your spirit, you begin to understand your peace is your responsibility. This isn't about becoming cold. It's not about shutting people out or building walls so high no one can reach you. It's about building boundaries rooted in love for yourself. It's about honoring what you need to heal, to grow, to breathe. It's about understanding that you cannot become who you are meant to be while clinging to people, environments, and patterns that only see the old version of you. So today, this is your reminder: you don't need permission to evolve. You don't need to justify your growth. You don't need to hold on to what no longer fits just to make others comfortable. You are allowed to let go. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to focus on yourself fully because your peace matters more than their comfort, more than their opinion, more than their approval. Let them go. Protect your space. Choose yourself. There's a shift that happens the moment you realize that your energy is better spent on watering your own garden than chasing people who walked away. It doesn't happen overnight. At first, you feel the absence. You notice the silence. You catch yourself checking in, wondering what they're doing, whether they miss you, whether they even noticed you've been quiet. But after that phase, if you let it, something inside you starts to change. You begin to turn inward. You begin to look at yourself not as someone who was left behind, but as someone who is finally free to grow without interruption. That's the moment the real work begins. That's where growth lives. In the stillness, in the silence, in the solitude that used to scare you but now sets the stage for everything you're about to become. When you focus on your growth, you start asking different questions. You stop asking why they left and start asking why you stayed so long. You stop asking why they didn't value you and start asking whether you truly valued yourself. You start noticing your patterns not as evidence of failure but as places where your attention is needed. This kind of focus is not about revenge. It's not about becoming better to make them regret losing you. That's still focusing on them. No, this is about becoming better because you owe it to yourself. Because you've wasted enough time waiting for someone to see your worth, when that was always your job. Every time you choose your own healing over chasing closure, you're choosing growth. Every time you say no to a conversation that would only reopen old wounds, you're reclaiming your power. When you stop reacting to things that once triggered you, not because you're suppressing anything, but because they no longer hold any weight, you'll know you're growing. Growth doesn't always look like glowing up on the outside. Sometimes growth is messy. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just you choosing to stay in on a Friday night because you're tired of pretending to enjoy places that drain you. Sometimes it's you deleting a number, not out of anger, but because you finally accepted that not everyone deserves access to you. There's a version of you that exists beyond the pain, beyond the disappointment, beyond the people who didn't see you. That version of you is waiting to be chosen, not by anyone else, but by you. That version of you is honest, clear, focused, intentional. You don't get to meet them by staying in cycles that keep you small. You meet them when you decide that your life is too valuable to be spent on people who treat you like an option. You meet them when you choose peace over chaos, alignment over approval, and growth over comfort. Because growth is uncomfortable. It asks you to leave behind the familiar. It asks you to outgrow versions of yourself that were only built to survive what you've been through. It asks you to be brutally honest with yourself, Not so you can shame who you've been, but so you can step into who you were always meant to become. There is power in focusing on your own journey. Power in putting the blinders on, not to ignore the world, but to stop measuring your life by someone else's pace. You don't grow by comparing yourself to people who have different stories, different lessons, different timelines. You grow by checking in with yourself, by asking how far you've come, by honoring the small wins that no one else sees. You grow when you stop needing your growth to be validated, when you stop waiting for applause and just start doing the work. When you learn to sit with yourself and feel proud, not because someone finally noticed, but because you finally did. We live in a world that constantly wants us to look outside ourselves, to scroll endlessly, to compare, to seek affirmation, to ask others what we should do next. But there is something sacred about turning inward, about becoming so rooted in your values, your boundaries, your purpose, that you stop needing external permission to grow. Growth isn't loud. It doesn't need to be announced. It's in the way you respond to challenges, the way you hold yourself accountable, the way you begin to make decisions from a place of alignment rather than fear. When you truly focus on yourself, you stop giving away your power to people who don't know what to do with it. You stop explaining yourself to people who never intended to understand. You stop trying to fix things that aren't yours to fix. You start creating space for better thoughts, better habits, better people. You realize that healing isn't a destination, it's a practice. That the work never ends, but it becomes lighter as you become stronger. You start choosing environments that support your growth rather than shrink you. You start choosing people who speak your language, who honor your boundaries, who see you clearly without needing a performance. It's easy to fall back into old patterns when you're lonely. Easy to text the wrong person just to feel something familiar. Easy to convince yourself that you've changed when really you're just avoiding the work. Focusing on yourself means resisting that urge. It means staying committed to your growth even when it's boring, even when no one is clapping, even when it would be so much easier to go back to what hurt you. Because growth is choosing yourself over and over again. Even when you're tempted to choose someone else, you owe yourself your own attention. You owe yourself the same energy you gave to people who didn't appreciate it. You owe yourself the love you kept trying to give away. You owe yourself patience, forgiveness, and care. Because no one else can do that work for you. No one else is responsible for your healing. No one else gets to define your worth. That's your job. And the more you focus on your own growth, the less you need others to fill the void. The more you discover that the void was never something to be filled externally, it was a space asking to be reclaimed by you. You can't grow if you're still looking back. You can't heal if you're still stuck in stories that no longer serve you. Focusing on yourself means letting go not just of people, but of expectations, of timelines, of narratives that kept you small. It means rewriting the story. It means choosing to believe that the best is not behind you, but ahead of you. It means having the courage to be alone with yourself long enough to understand what you actually want, rather than just chasing what you were taught to want. Focusing on your growth means setting boundaries and keeping them. Not to push people away, but to protect the version of you that's emerging. It means being willing to disappoint others in order to not betray yourself. It means learning to say no without guilt. It means no longer overextending yourself just to be liked. Because growth isn't about being liked. It's about being real. It's about being in integrity with yourself, even when that makes others uncomfortable. Especially then, you'll notice that the more you grow, the more you outgrow. Outgrow conversations, friendships, habits, even versions of yourself. That's not a sign you're doing something wrong, it's a sign you're moving. It's a sign you're evolving. You'll learn that not everyone is meant to go with you. And that's okay. Not everyone is meant to understand your journey. And that's okay too. The point was never to convince them. The point is to become someone you're proud of. Someone who doesn't just survive, but thrives. Someone who knows how to hold space for their own evolution. Even when it's hard. Even when it's lonely. Even when it's unfamiliar. Focusing on your growth is the greatest act of self-respect you can practice. It means recognizing that you are a work in progress, and that's a beautiful thing. It means understanding that you are both the artist and the canvas, and you get to decide what your life becomes. It means trading validation for vision, comfort for clarity, approval for authenticity. Because when you're growing, you're not trying to be who they need, you're becoming who you need. You're building a life that fits your soul, not your fear. You're finally choosing you. And that changes everything. Protecting your peace is not a passive act, it's an intentional, daily decision that shapes everything about how you live, how you love, and how you lead yourself. Peace isn't just the absence of noise, conflict, or chaos. It's a state of being that allows you to hear your own voice clearly, to stay grounded in the midst of external storms, and to move through life with a sense of alignment and steadiness. When you treat your peace like it's your greatest asset, you stop giving it away so freely. You stop letting people rent space in your mind who don't pay in respect, care, or honesty. You stop letting circumstances you can't control dictate the emotional climate inside you. Peace is power. It's not loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It simply exists as a quiet strength that guides your choices, your responses, and your direction. Too often we learn to sacrifice peace for connection. We stay in conversations too long, entertain people who drain us, allow opinions that don't serve us to take up residence in our thoughts. We think keeping the peace means avoiding conflict, saying yes when we want to say no, shrinking ourselves to make others feel comfortable. But that's not peace, that's self-abandonment. True peace doesn't come from pleasing others. It comes from honoring yourself, from knowing what triggers your inner storm and choosing to remove yourself from those environments before they pull you in, from understanding what calms your nervous system and building a life around those rainbows, from being brave enough to disconnect from what disturbs your soul, even if it once felt like home. When you protect your peace, you create boundaries not to keep people out, but to keep your alignment intact. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors with locks. They let the right people in and keep what's harmful out. And when you enforce those boundaries consistently and without apology, you start to see who was there for the version of you that tolerated chaos, and who respects the version of you that chooses calm. That clarity might hurt at first, but in the long run, it will bring you more serenity than any forced relationship ever could. Peace shows up in the smallest choices: waking up 5 minutes earlier to center yourself, muting notifications that constantly spike your anxiety, walking away from arguments that are rooted in ego, not truth, turning down invites that don't align with your energy. These decisions may seem small, but they're the bricks that build a peaceful life. The more you practice them, the more natural they become. You begin to curate your environment with the same care you'd give to your physical health, because emotional and spiritual well-being deserve the same priority. You don't owe your availability to everyone. You don't owe your emotional energy to every problem that comes your way. Some things are simply not your assignment to fix. Some people are not your responsibility to carry. Peace is knowing the difference and choosing not to carry what was never yours in the first place. When you operate from peace, you move slower but with more purpose. You speak less but with more impact. You choose solitude not because you're antisocial, but because your soul needs space to breathe. You stop explaining your decisions to people who thrive on misunderstanding. You stop justifying your silence to those who never listened in the first place. You realize that peace is not something you find, it's something you protect, something you cultivate, something you defend like a sacred garden. And like any valuable garden, it requires daily tending, seasonal pruning, and the wisdom to know what needs to grow and what needs to go. There's a moment in your journey where you'll feel the pull to go back to the noise, the drama, the intensity that once felt familiar. Don't. Remember that the peace you feel now is not an accident. It's a result of the choices you made when it was hard, when you felt alone, when walking away cost you comfort but gave you clarity. Don't trade your peace for momentary connection. Don't sell your stillness for shallow validation. Don't let guilt make you answer calls that should go unanswered. Protect your peace like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. Your mental health depends on it. Your dreams depend on it. Your future self is quietly hoping you'll choose it over and over again. There will always be noise in the world. always be chaos, opinions, expectations, projections. You can't control that, but you can control how much of it gets inside you. Peace is found in that control, in the pause before you respond, in the breath before you react, in the discernment to know what deserves your energy and what deserves your silence. Protecting your peace means knowing that you can't heal if you keep exposing your open wounds to toxic environments. It means saying, not today to anything that disturbs the calm you've worked hard to cultivate. It means letting people think what they want while you preserve your joy, your sanity, your center. And no, peace doesn't mean life gets easy. It just means you're no longer fighting unnecessary battles. It means you're choosing your mental and emotional hygiene over proving points. It means you've accepted that not every situation needs your attendance, not every message needs your reply. Not every loss is a bad thing. Sometimes losing something chaotic is gaining something priceless. Sometimes being misunderstood is the tax you pay for inner freedom. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom in motion. So protect your peace like it's gold, like it's sacred, like it's the rare and beautiful gift that it is. Because when you live from a place of peace, you start attracting peace. You start recognizing peace in others. You stop settling for emotional turbulence as a normal state. You elevate. You become less reactive, more intuitive. You don't just live, you align. And that kind of living changes everything.
Letting go is one of the most misunderstood parts of growth. We're taught to associate it with loss, with giving up, with failure. It feels like the end of something we weren't ready to release, so we mourn it, even when it wasn't good for us. But what if letting go isn't really about losing anything? What if it's about finally seeing things for what they are, not what we hoped, not what we imagined, but what they actually are? That shift alone changes everything, because letting go isn't loss, it's clarity. It's the kind of clarity that doesn't always come gently. Sometimes it shows up through disappointment, through silence, through someone choosing not to show up for you, through repeated patterns that finally break you open enough to see that holding on was costing you more than it was giving you. Non-negotiable is painful before it's freeing. That's why so many people avoid letting go, because we confuse pain with permanence. We think if it hurts, it must be wrong. But the truth is, sometimes the pain is a sign that something is being ripped away from you that never truly fit. It's your intuition finally being louder than your attachment. It's your peace begging you to stop making excuses for what's not serving you. Letting go is not just about releasing people. It's about releasing illusions, the version of them you kept alive in your head. The potential you clung to while ignoring the reality. The story you told yourself to justify why you stayed so long, why you tried so hard, why you kept showing up for someone who wasn't meeting you there. Letting go is that quiet, brave moment when you choose truth over comfort, when you admit that love isn't always enough if it comes without respect, when you see that connection without consistency is just confusion, when you stop making excuses for someone's patterns just because you feel something for them, that's clarity. It's not bitter, it's not angry. It's just honest. It's you saying, I see it now, and because I see it, I can't unsee it. That seeing is what sets you free. You stop over-explaining, overcompensating, overextending. You start conserving, you start listening to your nervous system. You start choosing peace over potential. And even though the world might call that giving up, you'll know better. You'll know it's growing up. Clarity makes space. Space for deeper joy. Space for more aligned relationships. Space for you to come back to yourself without feeling like you need to rescue someone else to feel whole. You realize that letting go doesn't mean you hate them. It doesn't mean you don't care. It simply means you care about yourself too. That you're allowed to outgrow people. That you're allowed to leave, even if there wasn't some dramatic ending. And that not everything has to fall apart loudly to be valid. Sometimes clarity is quiet. A slow pullback. A gentle, firm knowing that you're no longer in a space that reflects the love, stability, and purpose you want for your life. And maybe one of the hardest things about clarity is that it doesn't always come with closure. It doesn't always bring answers or apologies. It just brings you back to you, to the version of you that finally sees how much energy was being spent on holding up something that wasn't holding you back, to the version of you that now understands not everything broken can be fixed, and not everything painful has to be carried forever. That in itself is liberating. You no longer need to chase understanding. You no longer need to beg for reciprocity. You no longer need to convince someone of your value. Letting go gives you the space to start showing up for yourself the way you always hoped others would. When you let go, you release control. Not in a way that feels helpless, but in a way that feels trusting. You trust that you don't need to force anything to keep it, that the right people won't make you question your worth, that what is meant for you will never require you to betray yourself to keep it. You begin to understand that love doesn't equal longevity, that some people were only meant to be lessons, not lifelines, that just because a chapter ends doesn't mean the whole story is over. You stop holding on just because you've invested time. Time doesn't validate a relationship. Alignment does. Growth does. Honesty does. And clarity isn't just about seeing others clearly, it's about seeing yourself. Sometimes the letting go is about the version of you that tolerated what you no longer resonate with. The version of you that accepted less because you hadn't yet remembered your value. That part of you deserves compassion, not shame, because they were surviving, they were loving the best way they knew how. But you're not there anymore, and the longer you hold on to what you've outgrown, the heavier it becomes. Letting go gives you permission to evolve, to rewrite the narrative, to say this is no longer mine to carry. There's a deep peace that comes with clarity, the kind that doesn't need external validation, the kind that doesn't keep looking back wondering, what if? Because it already knows the answer. If it was meant for you, it would have stayed aligned. And even if it was beautiful at some point, not all beauty is meant to last. Some things exist to teach us contrast, to show us what we don't want, to guide us to what we do. The clarity that comes from letting go doesn't erase the memories. It just reframes them. It says, that happened. It mattered. But it doesn't belong in my future. That level of truth sets you free in ways that false hope never could. Letting go teaches you to trust your intuition more. You start noticing when your energy shifts around certain people or spaces. You start listening to the tension in your body instead of ignoring it. You stop negotiating with your inner knowing. That's what clarity does. It strengthens the bond between you and your truth. You no longer override your gut feelings just to keep the peace because you understand that peace that requires your silence is not peace. It's suppression. Letting go is reclaiming your voice, your energy, your path. It's a return home to yourself. So, no, letting go isn't loss. It's the doorway to something deeper, something more real. It's the end of confusion, the end of emotional loops, the end of trying to fix what was never in your power to fix. It's standing in the middle of your life and saying, I choose clarity over chaos. I choose clarity over chaos. I choose myself fully. Even if it's lonely, even if it's hard, even if it hurts. Because clarity, real clarity, clears the runway for everything that's actually meant to land. And nothing feels more like freedom than finally making room for what's real. You can't heal in the same environment that broke you. That truth hits deep, not because it's hard to understand, but because it's hard to accept. Healing requires safety. It requires peace, space, time, and perspective. But when you're surrounded by the same noise, the same triggers, the same patterns that fractured you, there's no room for real healing. It's like trying to mend a wound while standing in the middle of the battlefield that caused it. You might be trying your best, reading the books, listening to the podcast, saying the affirmations, but if you're still immersed in the environment that conditioned you to feel small, unloved, anxious, or invisible, you're not healing, you're surviving. And there's a massive difference between the two. Healing can't be surface level. It can't exist just in your intentions. It has to be backed by action. Sometimes that action looks like leaving. Not because you're weak, not because you're running away, but because staying in a toxic space while trying to grow is like trying to breathe underwater without any air. The place where you were broken often holds the same energy that keeps you stuck, the same voices that told you you weren't enough, the same dynamics that made you question your worth. The same silence that ignored your pain. And you can't rewrite your story in a place that only ever knew you by your wounds. There's nothing noble about staying in the fire that's burning you, hoping it'll suddenly turn into warmth. Sometimes love looks like walking away. Sometimes strength is found in the exit, not the endurance. Healing begins the moment you say, this environment is no longer aligned with the version of me I'm becoming. That moment is not a betrayal. It's a declaration. You're declaring that your peace matters more than their comfort, that your growth matters more than their expectations, that your healing is not up for negotiation. And let's be clear, this doesn't only apply to people. Sometimes the environment is a job, a routine, a place, a city. Sometimes it's your own internal dialogue, shaped by years of self-criticism. Sometimes it's the habits you cling to because they're familiar, even though they no longer serve you. Healing means disrupting those patterns. It means stepping out of the autopilot that led you into burnout, anxiety, insecurity. It means confronting the fact that even though something might have once felt like home, it's no longer where you belong. Home should feel safe. If it doesn't, it's not home. It's a memory. You don't owe permanence to places that harmed you. You don't owe your healing to the people who hurt you. You owe it to yourself to build something new internally and externally. That might look like setting boundaries so firm they make others uncomfortable. That might look like finding new circles that speak your language of peace, accountability, and authenticity. That might look like solitude, deep, necessary solitude, where you finally learn the sound of your own voice without everyone else's opinions layered on top. That silence, that space becomes sacred. It becomes your sanctuary. Because healing doesn't just require absence of pain, it requires presence of truth. You can't heal where you were taught to shrink, where your emotions were invalidated, where your dreams were mocked or minimized. Healing means expansion. It means permission to take up space, to speak, to feel, to process without being judged or silenced. But you can't do that around the same people who caused the wounds and still refuse to take accountability. You can't do that in a space that celebrates your compliance but punishes your authenticity. Healing means stepping into the unknown and trusting that the peace ahead is worth the discomfort of the transition. The hardest part is often the guilt. The voice that says, but they're family. But I've been here so long, but I don't want to hurt them. That guilt is the chain that keeps people tied to pain disguised as loyalty. But true loyalty should never cost you your sanity. You can love people and still walk away. You can forgive and still choose distance. You can wish them well and still protect your peace. Healing isn't selfish, it's sacred. And you are not responsible for the reactions of those who benefited from your brokenness. You are responsible for your life, your energy, your evolution. Sometimes the environment doesn't change, so you have to. You have to be the one to disrupt the cycle, to end the narrative, to stop repeating what hurt you. That takes courage. It takes vision. Because walking away means you're no longer feeding the version of you that was dependent on dysfunction. You're starving the pattern, forward. You're saying no more to the trauma loops. That's healing. That's liberation. And even if it's lonely at first, it's also the beginning of your rebirth. Healing flourishes where honesty lives, where you can be vulnerable without fear, where you can rest without guilt, where you're not constantly explaining your worth or overcompensating for your presence. That environment might not exist yet, but you can create it. Piece by piece, boundary by boundary, choice by choice. You get to decide what kind of life supports your healing, and you get to walk away from anything that doesn't. You're not being dramatic. You're not being too sensitive. You're recognizing what your nervous system has been trying to tell you all along. This place is no longer safe for my healing. And that recognition is everything. It's the spark that ignites change. The moment you realize you're allowed to build something better, and not just allowed, you deserve to. Because healing is not just about feeling better. It's about living better, choosing better, being better for yourself first. You can't become whole while living inside the pieces that broke you. You can't thrive where you were taught to survive. You can't bloom in soil that doesn't nourish you. So change your environment, internally, externally, slowly, boldly, with love and intention. Healing isn't a destination, it's a lifestyle. And it starts the moment you realize you're worthy of a life that supports your wholeness, not just your tolerance. So walk away if you must. Start over if you need to. Do it scared, do it shaky, but do it because you're not broken, you're becoming. You're becoming. And healing is waiting for you on the other side of that choice. Growth is not always loud or visible. Sometimes it's silent. Sometimes it's you sitting alone in a room with your own thoughts, choosing not to send the message, choosing not to chase closure, choosing to stay silent when provoked, choosing to walk away without a dramatic exit. That's growth. It doesn't always come with fireworks or applause. Sometimes it's the tiniest shifts that carry the deepest strength. And the truth is, most people won't even notice you're growing because growth often happens in private. It's the inner battles you win that no one sees, the emotional restraint, the self-control, the moment you choose not to let someone else's chaos become your own, the moment you no longer need validation from the same people who used to control your sense of worth. That kind of growth doesn't need to be broadcast. It needs to be lived. There's a phase in your journey where it looks like nothing's happening. You're not posting the wins. You're not explaining your evolution. You're not updating the world on how you're changing. But inside, everything is shifting. Your standards are rising. Your boundaries are tightening. Your circle is shrinking. Your self-awareness is expanding. You start moving differently, not because you're bitter or cold, but because you're focused. Because you're healing. Because you're no longer available for things that drain you. Growth whispers. It rarely shouts. And because it happens quietly, some people will assume you've changed in ways that are negative. That's because they only knew the version of you who tolerated too much, gave too freely, stayed too long. But growth demands transformation, and transformation often means letting go of who you used to be to make space for who you're becoming. Not everyone is meant to understand your growth. And that's okay, because this season of your life isn't about proving anything to anyone. It's about being at peace with yourself, about walking in alignment, even if it means walking alone for a while. The people meant for your next chapter won't require you to shrink or pretend. They won't misinterpret your silence as distance or your boundaries as rejection. They'll respect your growth even if they don't fully understand it. Because the right people grow with you. They meet you where you're evolving to, not where you used to be. Growth is in the way you respond. It's in the pause between your triggers and your reactions. It's in choosing understanding over impulse. It's in seeing your patterns before they play out and making a different choice. That choice may be hard. It might feel unnatural at first. But every time you choose to honor your healing over your habits, you're growing. Every time you forgive yourself for who you were when you didn't know better, you're growing. Every time you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, you're growing. And no one needs to see it for it to be real. There's a sacredness in growth that's hard to explain. It's not glamorous. They'll see it in how you carry yourself, in what you tolerate, in what you no longer respond to, in the way your peace has become non-negotiable. Not every season of growth needs to be shared. Not every transformation needs a witness. Sometimes the most powerful changes happen in solitude. When you're sitting with your own darkness, learning how to be your own light. When you're not asking the world to fix you, but learning how to heal from within. That kind of growth isn't performance. It's becoming, and becoming is enough, even if no one else sees it yet. Healing is not linear. It's not a straight road with mile markers and signs that say, you're almost there. It's not a neat checklist where you can cross off steps 1 through 10 and suddenly be whole. Healing is messy. It's unpredictable. It circles back. It drags you through the same emotions more than once, sometimes more intensely the second or third time around. It brings up old wounds just when you thought you'd buried them deep enough. And it tests your patience, your resolve, your belief in yourself. There are days when you feel like you've made progress, like you're finally free of what once held you down. Then out of nowhere, a smell, a memory, a comment, or a silence can knock the wind out of you and make you feel like you're back at square one. But you're not. Even when it feels like you're spiraling, you're still further than you were before. Because the awareness you have now, the resilience you've built, the tools you've gathered, they weren't there the first time. And that matters more than you know. Healing doesn't happen in one grand moment of realization. It unfolds in the small choices you make every day. It's in the moment you don't respond to a text that would pull you back into a toxic cycle. It's in the way you pause to breathe when your heart starts racing instead of diving headfirst into panic. It's in how you let yourself cry instead of numbing out or pretending everything's fine. It's in the boundaries you set, even when they're uncomfortable. It's in the way you show up for yourself, especially when no one else seems to notice you're struggling. These tiny decisions may not look like much from the outside, but they are the bricks you're laying to build a new foundation. They're the proof that you're healing, even when you feel broken. There's no timeline for healing, no expiration date on your pain. No one can tell you how long you're allowed to feel what you feel. Some wounds are so deep, so personal, they take years to process. And that's okay. Healing isn't a race. It's not about getting over it quickly. It's about honoring what you've been through, sitting with it, learning from it, letting it move through you instead of bottling it up and pretending you're fine. Sometimes healing is slow because you've had to survive for so long. You've had to keep moving, keep functioning, keep pretending. So when you finally stop and give yourself permission to feel, it all comes crashing in, and that flood can be overwhelming. But it's also the beginning of release. You can't rush healing. You can't will yourself into being okay. You can't fake your way to peace. Healing demands honesty. It asks you to confront the parts of yourself you've ignored or rejected. It calls you to look at the version of you that showed up in survival mode and to offer that version compassion, not judgment. It means forgiving yourself for not knowing better, for staying too long, for losing yourself in people who didn't value you, for breaking your own heart just to keep someone else whole. That kind of forgiveness is hard. It's humbling, but it's also freeing because it allows you to take your power back, to stop replaying the past with shame and start writing a future with grace. Healing also means letting go of the idea that you have to be strong all the time. That strength is only shown through stoicism. Real strength is vulnerability. It's admitting you're not okay. It's asking for help. It's resting when your body and mind are tired. It's showing up for yourself on the days when everything feels heavy and dark. You don't have to perform your strength. You just have to be real. And that raw, honest presence with yourself is one of the most healing things you can offer. Because when you stop pretending, you create space for actual healing to happen. Some days healing feels like empowerment. Other days it feels like grief. You're grieving who you used to be. You're grieving the version of yourself that didn't have the awareness you have now. You're grieving lost time, missed opportunities, relationships that couldn't meet you where you were. You're grieving illusions of who people were, of what you thought life would be like. That grief is part of healing. It's not a setback, it's not weakness. It's your body and soul making peace with reality, letting go of what was so you can step into what's meant for you now. And sometimes that step is slow, sometimes it's shaky, but it's still forward. There's a loneliness in healing that no one talks about enough, because once you start seeing clearly, you start realizing how much of your life was built on coping mechanisms, on people pleasing, on staying quiet to keep the peace. You start noticing the spaces where you no longer belong, the conversations that drain you, the relationships that never truly saw you. And that awareness can be isolating. It can feel like you're walking away from everything you knew, even if it wasn't healthy. But that solitude is where the real work happens, in the quiet, in the stillness, in the space between who you were and who you're becoming. That's where healing breathes. That's where you meet yourself again. Healing will humble you. It will strip away the ego. It will show you all the places where you acted from pain instead of love. It will ask you to be accountable, not just for what happened to you, but for how you responded. It will push you to grow past the blame and into responsibility. Not because what happened was your fault, but because your healing is. No one else can do that work for you. No one else can feel your emotions or rewrite your narrative. That's yours to do. And while that might feel daunting, it's also powerful because it means you're not helpless. You're not defined by what broke you. You get to choose how the story continues. There will be times you think you've healed, and something will trigger you and bring it all back. That doesn't mean you failed. It means healing is layered. Each layer reveals something new, a deeper truth, a hidden wound. A belief you didn't know was still there. And every time that layer shows up, you have another chance to hold yourself with compassion, to respond differently, to offer grace instead of guilt. That's what growth looks like. Not perfection, but presence. Not control, but surrender. Not constant happiness, but realness. Feeling all of it. The joy, the sadness, the fear, the hope. Allowing it to move through you without clinging or resisting. You don't need to have it all figured out to be healing. You don't need to know the destination to take the next step. You don't have to fix every part of you to be worthy of love and peace right now. Healing is not about becoming someone new. It's about coming home to who you were before the world told you who to be. It's about peeling away the layers of protection you built out of fear and uncovering the softness, the strength, the truth underneath. About remembering your own light, even when you've spent years in the dark. And the most beautiful part of healing is that it gives you back to yourself. Gently, fully, You begin to trust your intuition again. You begin to listen to your body, to your boundaries, to your needs. You start making decisions from alignment instead of anxiety. You stop trying to fix or save everyone else and start showing up for yourself. You begin to believe that peace isn't something you chase, it's something you choose every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Healing won't always feel like progress. But every time you choose to stay instead of run, to feel instead of numb, to speak instead of silence yourself, you're healing. Every time you show up for your inner child, every time you comfort your own heart, every time you decide you are worth the effort, you're healing. And that healing doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be real. It just needs to be yours. It just needs to keep going. Not everyone deserves access to you. There's a quiet kind of power in realizing that your time, your energy, your presence, these are privileges, not guarantees. You don't owe everyone your availability just because they ask for it. You don't have to stretch yourself thin to meet expectations that drain your soul. You don't have to answer every call, reply to every message, or show up every time someone decides they need you. The truth is, not everyone is meant to sit at your table. Not everyone gets to walk beside you in every season. As you grow, as you evolve, as you begin to truly understand your value, you realize that protecting your space is not selfish. It's sacred. There's a version of you that was wide open, always accessible, constantly trying to be everything for everyone. That version of you said yes, even when you were tired, agreed even when you wanted to say no, kept giving even when your cup was empty. And for a while, it may have felt like the right thing to do. Maybe it made you feel loved, needed, validated. Maybe it was your way of staying safe, of making sure people didn't leave, of avoiding conflict, of earning worthiness. But eventually, that kind of living starts to hurt. It chips away at your peace. It keeps you performing instead of being. It keeps you locked in dynamics where your worth is tied to your usefulness. And that's not love. That's obligation. That's burnout wrapped in politeness. You begin to see it clearly when you take a step back. When you get quiet enough to hear your own voice again, you realize that the constant giving, the constant availability, the constant yes wasn't love. It was a fear of not being enough unless you were doing something for someone else. And when that realization lands, it shakes you. Because you start to wonder, if I stop overgiving, will anyone stay? If I stop showing up out of guilt, who will still choose me? Those are hard questions, but they're necessary. Because the answers reveal the truth about your relationships, who values you for who you are, and who only values what you do. There's a kind of peace that comes when you no longer allow everyone to access you. When you begin filtering your time through the lens of purpose, not obligation. When you start asking yourself, does this person bring peace or chaos? Does this dynamic nourish me or drain me? Do I feel seen here or just used? These questions are uncomfortable, but they're honest. And honest questions lead to aligned decisions. You're not here to carry people who refuse to walk on their own. You're not here to be a therapist, a savior, a buffer, a constant fixer. That's not your role. Your role is to be yourself fully, to live in alignment with your truth, to give from overflow, not depletion. And giving from overflow means tending to your own needs first. It means knowing yourself well enough to know what feels like a full body and what feels like silent resentment. It means drawing lines that protect your energy, not because you're cold, but because you've learned what it costs when you don't. It costs your peace. It costs your joy. It costs your connection to yourself. And the people who truly love you, who are meant to walk with you, will respect those boundaries. They won't guilt you. They won't manipulate you. They won't disappear the moment you say no. They'll honor your growth, even when it challenges them. Because they love you, not just the version of you that says yes. You're allowed to outgrow access points. You're allowed to evolve past dynamics that no longer serve you. You're allowed to say, this isn't working for me anymore, even if you can't fully explain why. You're allowed to require more from the people in your life, not more perfection, but more presence, more honesty, more emotional maturity. You're allowed to hold a higher standard for how you're treated, how your time is honored, how your energy is respected. And if someone can't meet you there, that's okay. You're not here to convince anyone of your worth. You're not here to beg for reciprocity. You're here to embody your truth and let that truth act as a filter for what and who gets to stay. This doesn't mean you become closed off or hardened. It means you become discerning. It means you understand that your peace is a reflection of your choices. And when you choose people who don't respect your peace, you betray yourself. That betrayal may not be loud, but it's deep. You feel it in the exhaustion, the resentment, the quiet disconnection from your own soul. Reclaiming your peace means reclaiming your choices. It means choosing to be around people who pour into you as much as you pour into them. It means no longer staying just to avoid guilt or discomfort. It means having the courage to walk away, not because you're bitter, but because you've finally learned to honor yourself. There's a sacredness in protecting your access, in saying, not everyone gets all of me, in realizing that your presence is a gift, not a given, that your energy is medicine, and not everyone knows how to receive it, that your heart is valuable, and not everyone deserves to hold it. When you start treating yourself like you matter, the world shifts. You stop entertaining what drains you. You stop accepting breadcrumbs. You stop lowering your standards for the sake of keeping the peace. Because you've learned that fake peace built on your silence is not peace at all. It's self-abandonment in disguise. And self-abandonment is a slow erosion of your spirit. It looks like smiling when you want to scream, nodding when you want to leave, giving when you're already empty. But you don't have to live that way anymore. You're allowed to take your power back. You're allowed to reclaim you're allowed to be unavailable. You're allowed to close doors that were once wide open. Not out of spite, but out of sovereignty, out of love for yourself, out of reverence for your own capacity. You begin to see the difference between those who show up for the version of you that gives endlessly and those who show up for the version of you that's rooted, boundaried, and whole. The former may fade when you change. The latter will flourish with you. That's how you know who truly belongs. Not by who stays when you're giving everything, but by who respects you when you start giving to yourself first. When you become less convenient. When you start saying no without explanation, when your availability is no longer automatic. And yes, it may feel uncomfortable at first. There may be guilt. There may be pushback. You may question yourself. But eventually, the discomfort fades and is replaced by clarity, by relief, by a quiet knowing that you've chosen yourself in a way that's real and lasting. You start to realize that protecting your peace isn't about building walls. It's about creating filters. It's about choosing where your light goes, where your love flows, where your attention rests. You realize that access to you is a privilege that must be earned through trust, consistency, care, and mutual respect. It's not something to be handed out freely to anyone who simply demands your time. It's something to be guarded, cherished, honored, just like your heart. And when you start living from that place, you begin to attract relationships that reflect your worth. People who see your value without needing you to prove it. People who understand that love isn't about possession. It's about presence. It's about showing up with intention, not expectation. With honesty, not obligation. You'll know you're healing when you stop needing to explain why you've become more private. When you stop over-explaining your boundaries, when you stop apologizing for your emotional bandwidth, when you no longer feel the urge to be everywhere for everyone all the time, because you've realized that what's meant for you will never ask you to abandon yourself. It will never punish you for protecting your peace. It will never demand access without offering respect in return. This version of you is more intentional, more aware, more protective of your energy. You no longer see saying a no as rejection. You see it as redirection. You no longer fear distance. You see it as necessary space for clarity. And you no longer entertain chaos. You choose stillness, even when it feels unfamiliar, because stillness speaks. It tells you what's real. It tells you who values your presence. It tells you who sees your soul, not just your service. And that kind of seeing, that's what you deserve. That's what you're making room for. That's why not everyone gets access anymore.